Rich, is there any way for us to know which members of the public are participating? Can you display that?
Yeah, if you go to the bottom left, I can't display it for everybody, but if you go, there should be a toolbar on the bottom. If you look, there's a little button called participants.
Okay, and that shows everyone who is currently dialed in.
Yep, that is correct.
Faces. So there's no one else besides that?
No, it looks like we have 10 people in here.
Okay, great. That's what I see also. Thank you.
Not a problem.
All right, it sounds like we're ready to go. Are we live now, Rich?
It's loading, and yeah, it says that we're live on my screen. I'm just waiting for it to get up on YouTube, and we should be good to go.
All right. Let me call this meeting to order at 5:05 on Monday, July 6th, 2020. Let's start off by having a moment of silence, please. Okay, I'm ready to take the roll call here. Chairman Bruce Killen, I'm here. Vice Chairman Cindy Mahalo.
Here.
Janet Kravanis. Sheila O'Sullivan Feeney.
Here.
Okay. Harry Bryans.
Here.
Jason DeCecco. I see you, but I don't hear you. Jason is here. And Joe Pinto.
Here.
Hey, Joe. And Steve Neese is not here. Rich, how do you pronounce your name, Rich, your last name? I'm sorry.
It's Lafayette.
Okay. Rich Lafayette is here. And supervisors Mike Russo. Mike, are you here? And Leonard Altieri, are you here?
I'm here, Bruce.
Okay, great. Let me, actually I went out of sequence here, but do I have a motion to accept the agenda for this evening?
So moved.
Do I have a motion to accept the minutes from our last meeting?
So moved.
I'm going to add a couple things to the agenda because I got them at the last minute. And I'd also like to ask people to try to get me this stuff a little earlier, because what seems to be happening is I complete the agenda and then I get a flurry of items to add to it. And I don't know the adding process. So that's why I'm going to plug these in now. Some of the other things that we're going to discuss tonight that are not on the agenda are, Janet, you had mentioned the pop-up garden and selecting a date for that event. You have to raise your hand, I guess.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Cindy, you had an interest in talking about rain garden needs in anticipation of activity coming up.
Actually, let's hold on that, but I would like to just briefly make a mention of tree inventory plans.
Okay, that's the next item that I have here. Sarah Grosso, are you here? No. I wanted to talk about our new intern, but if she's not here, it doesn't make much sense to spend too much time with it. And then finally, Greer Park, which is on the agenda, but I have two elements of Greer Park to discuss. The first of which is the environmental review that's taking place shortly. And the second one is the stream cleanup that I've heard about. And I'll let you, when we get to it, Sheila, I'll let you talk to both those items. All right, getting to old business. Greer Park comes up first. Sheila, you want to share what the status of that Greer Park project is?
Well, the great news is we're making progress on it. The public input meeting will be held on Tuesday, July 21st from 5 to 8 p.m. It will be held at the ballroom at Ellis Preserve, and it's going to be mask required, a one-way system in, a one-way system out at each of the 4 stations, which will be one station regarding, the environmental issues. There'll be another station about what the park could look like. There'll be a station regarding the aquatic life down there, and a station of the pond and features and some options. There'll be 6 spots at each, and we're going to have a count to make sure that we can move people safely in and out of this system. Then we'll keep, a control of no more than 24 people at any given time. It's an open house format, which is wonderful, so that you don't need to stay for the 3 hours, but it allows people to safely kind of peruse through and just kind of gather the information that they would like. At the end, we're having EAC table, which is wonderful, and I definitely need help with that. And what's great about this, as we said, we will also have this, the flyer went out, and I know everyone has gotten, I sent that also to everyone today. Again, the QR code is there. We ask that if you get a chance to really kind of go to the meeting before you do the survey, only because that way it will help you make better decisions. It's not just a black and white issue, in terms of the pond. We really want to look. It's a unique space. Its wildlife is really unique down there. We really want to embrace it and make people aware of how lucky we are to have a wetland in our backyard. And it's pretty awesome. I do need help from anyone, and I know Cindy and Bruce can't do it right now. And we understand anyone that has concerns with health. But Bruce, were you able to get me those pamphlets that I need for the EAC table?
I went to Penn State Extension Central. They pointed me to the Delaware County contact, and I have not yet back. But I'm still in pursuit of those.
Okay. Also, I would love if we could, since I really need at the EAC table people that have the knowledge and the credentials to speak, and I was hoping that maybe I can call PRC or the DCBA to see if I can get anyone, because they have educational outreach programs. And as long if you have a contact, or if you want me to make that call, but I would love to just have somebody there, even from Penn State Extension, or somebody that would be able to speak to it. And I also invite maybe you and Cindy, if you can't be there in person, maybe we can set up a Zoom call and just have, some of the people who don't feel comfortable being there, kind of just have you at the table. And I think it'd be a great chance. My goal with the EAC table is, once you've left that meeting, we want you to walk out and say, hey, what can I do to improve my environment?
Sure.
So, I'd love to engage them in opportunities to talk about rain barrels or rain gardens, or, how compacted soil if you don't aerate your soil. So there's many things that we can, and we will be able to have like the last touch with them. Of course, we'd love to see what they could do to help, make Newtown Square greener.
And you don't think that would take away from the focus on Greer Park?
No, because what you're doing is you've gone through Greer Park and you've been aware of what's down there. And as you're walking out, we're just giving you an opportunity to say, hey, what can I do to make my little, back of the woods greener? Sure. So you're not in any way competing. It's the same message all the way around.
I don't know what the logistics would be for a Zoom call, but I'm reluctant to go out to any meeting right now.
Well, maybe if we can set that up that way, Cindy, because I mean, you both are valuable resources. And if we can't have you at the meeting, I'd love to see if we can. And I'll have to check with Steve to see if it's even possible, because I know we have internet access from Ellis Preserve. And listen, they were generous enough to provide us with this free venue, which worked out great, because we could not have this in the township meeting, in the hall, because of the COVID-19 restrictions. Have, masks will be required, but in addition, we have the survey, and we really would like to help, spread the word. So I sent everyone the link. If you can share it. And my concern is, if we don't communicate this really well, we're only going to have, the people who are in the immediate area be heard. And this really is a township wide issue, because this affects our water. It's part of our watershed, and it's bigger than just, Beechwood and Kelly and Lewis.
Yeah, Sheila, that's an excellent update, and I am glad to participate via Zoom. If you can do the technology, I'll be glad to help in that way.
Great, awesome. I'll see what I can do. And I think it's and anyone else who doesn't feel comfortable, is there anyone from the committee or maybe even volunteers that could help man that table with me? Because we need to have someone there we want to be there from, let's say, it opens from 5 to 8. So we want to have somebody there, maybe, the 4:30 to 6:30 and the 6:30 to 8, or, anyone reach out. And I definitely need somebody at that table,
I can help you out, Sheila.
All right, Joe, awesome. And if anyone has any connections with maybe like the high school environmental groups or anyone else that can speak to these issues that's passionate about them too, I'd love, as I said, it doesn't have to be,
Well, I can reach out to the Master Watershed Steward Network,
oh,
and there's a whole cadre of trained people who are trained just for this purpose, is to do public education.
and we might only have 20 people show up, but this is really important that we provided a in-person opportunity to educate the public. The 4 stations are critical for those who are most opposed to any type of environmental issues, to learn about riparian buffers, learn about the watershed, learn about the aquatic life and the mussels and things of that nature that are down there, and the birds. And so that's why although it might seem not conducive to the restrictions we have with COVID, it will provide another venue for someone to be heard.
I think this is great. Sheila, are you up to speed on a possible stream cleanup when the possibility exists?
Well, from what I understand right now, we're going to get the report as to, what is in the pond right now. We understand that the stream, that report is coming in, but no one mentioned the stream cleanup, but it will be part of, we have stewards that we're asking people for the park, and they're going to be like captains, if you will. And they'll be involved in kind of coordinating these cleanups. And they'll also work with the Darby Creek Watershed Association to do those cleanups. Yep. So that usually is the week before Arbor Day. So yeah, we would want to do that beforehand. But I think what they're looking at is trying to get input to what will be there, and then we can go back. But I will check with Wade to see if there's any new information. And once that report is shared with everyone, I will make sure it's disseminated to all EAC people.
Okay, what's the schedule for the completion of the report?
That's what we're trying to make sure. We're hoping to get it done by the end of the year. And the key part to this is we want to make sure that we're available for the grants. So if we don't get this done by the end of this year, we're going to miss the grants. And that's why, and remember, we were lucky enough also to get with Urban Research and Applied Ecological Services, they're going to actually do the grant for us. So we want a deliverable project ready to go as soon as this is done. And that's why we want to be able to make sure that we hit that March deadline.
Great. Well, I think we've got to do some grant coordination, because I have some ideas in my mind too.
And I think what is, yeah, Bruce,
I don't want to compete for the same funds.
Right. And I think that we're going to talk with the township, because we want to make sure, that we are selective in terms of the way we approach this.
Sure. Okay. Janet, got a question for you. You sent me an email about the pop-up garden and selecting a date. Is that my understanding, or your
Yes.
understanding?
I wanted to get on the calendar if possible for May. So World Migratory Bird Day is May the 8th. Now the pop-up garden was planned to be like a 10-day event. So I was advised by Suzanne not to use Monday or Thursday. So the question is, do we want to start on a Friday for our opening event, and then end on a Tuesday? So that would be like May 7th through the 18th, or start on a Tuesday, May 4th, and end on Friday. The way it was originally designed, the first event is more of a speaker event. So there's
Right.
not a lot of milling around, sharing that.
Mhm.
And then the closing event is more of a party event, I would say, and we give out the plants. So I'm thinking that that would be better to be on a Friday.
Yep.
And so I needed your opinions. So we could choose either 7th through the 18th of May. That would be Tuesday to Friday to Tuesday, or May 4th, a Tuesday to Friday the 14th.
My only comment about that is Friday nights can be, well, actually, it's a very unusual circumstance, but
Yeah.
now, but many people have social obligations on other obligations on a Friday night. I'm not sure if anybody else has opinions about Friday versus maybe a Thursday night.
Well, we can't do Thursday because Suzanne said not to use Thursday.
Okay, I guess
So we
that
could
conflicts
use-
with the meeting.
So we
Yeah.
could do Tuesday to Wednesday,
Hmm.
and that would be ending it on the 12th of May.
The Wednesday is nice. Friday would be very difficult, I believe, but
Okay.
is that Mother's Day weekend?
Sunday, the 9th is Mother's Day.
That would actually work out nice.
If we had it, what, from
That week
May-
of the week of
May
Mother's Day.
7th? No, that's a Friday. So we could make it May 4th, Tuesday, or May 5th, which is Wednesday.
I like the 4th through the 12th, and I agree with Sheila that if you have it over Mother's Day weekend, you can position it as a nice little Mother's Day outing. Bring your mother to see the garden.
Okay. Then I'll look at those dates. I'll send those dates to Suzanne. Get us on the calendar now.
Great. And carbon copy us when you communicate with
Yes.
Suzanne, so you all
I
are
will.
aware of what's going on.
Am I still making the buzzing noises in the ears?
I don't hear it.
Yes.
Yes? Okay, I'm going mute again.
Okay. The next item falls under new business, and I asked Harry just to give us an update on single-use plastic bags. Are you in a position to do that, Harry?
Well, we looked at this briefly in the spring of 2019. Westchester had enacted an ordinance, and a few other local municipalities were looking at them. We all know these things are a scourge. They're a convenience, but they're a scourge. California, Connecticut, Delaware, Hawaii, Maine, Oregon, and Vermont have all banned single-use plastic bags in all contexts or some contexts. New York being the most recent, they are using 23 billion single-use plastic bags in New York State alone. It's going to the landfill, they're up in the trees, but mostly they're in the ocean. And they are found in all sorts of aquatic life. They're just a scourge. And of course, the right thing to do, I think, is to ban them at the state level. But Steve Lopez once called Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the land of the giants. And he didn't mean that in a good way. And it follows that Pennsylvania has been the land of the giants on this issue. Some fellow who is the Republican majority leader in the Senate back in June of last year, who's from Center County, PA, and who has a plastic bag manufacturing facility in his district, got in the budget bill at the 11th hour a one-year moratorium on local municipalities banning the use of single-use plastic bags, which affected, among other things, Philadelphia, which has had such an ordinance in the statute in the works. This year, they got it in again. And so the ban runs until the earlier of June 30, 2021, or 6 months after Governor Wolf lets the COVID emergency order expire. What the two had to do with each other is not absolutely clear to me. But we've been contacted by something called Penn Environment, who's tracking all this. And they believe it might be useful if the governing bodies of the various municipalities write their local representatives and say, enough already, stop preempting local municipalities from doing what they're entitled to do. I mean, we all agree a state ban would be the right thing, but unless we can change the political complexion in Harrisburg, it's never going to happen. So the question is, should local municipalities have the flexibility on their own to ban single-use plastic bags? And would we recommend to the Board of Supervisors that they go on record as taking that position? Penn Environment says we should recommend to the Board of Supervisors, and that's the issue for the group.
What did Westchester do? Didn't they pass the ban? Did they have to reverse that decision?
What is that, Bruce?
Westchester, didn't they pass
Westchester passed a ban. I think it never took effect when this preemption came in. And at some point they were going to think about letting it take effect and letting the state come after them. I think it's a muddle out there, frankly, and I don't know whether they think it's in effect or not.
I know that Narberth. Oh, yep, you just said exactly what I was about to say, Bruce. I know that Narberth, one of my old colleagues that I used to work with, is a council member, or used to be a council member in Narberth. And I just pulled up their ordinance right now. I know that they passed that. It would have been probably around 2017. So it would have been before the legislature inserted the preemption language that Harry's speaking of. But there's a lot. I mean, I was just within a quick search here, was able to pull up their ordinance. I don't have an opinion on it right now at this moment, but if I were advising this board, I would also suggest that in addition to it speaking of plastic bags, we also include in that straws.
Include what, Leonard?
Straws.
Straws, yeah. Well, there are a lot of ordinances that address both. Some do just straws, some do. And there are a lot of municipalities in New Jersey now who are not prevented by Trenton, who are adopting these bans. And the question is, should we be allowed to do it or not if we wanted to? And right now we're not, but it should be go on record as saying we should be allowed to. I mean, this is kind of silly in a way. The thing is totally tied up.
Guys, I have to ask you a question. I'm a dual citizen, so when I go over to Ireland, I have to pay 10 cents for a bag. So we can't get the exemption right now. Is there any way that we can maybe assess a charge just to bring people's attention to the bags while we're waiting to sort out this issue?
Well, Sheila, it's a very good point, but guess what?
What?
The language in effect in Pennsylvania right now says the General Assembly or a local government body or agency may not enact or enforce a law, rule, regulation, or ordinance imposing a tax on or relating to the use of, disposition, sale, prohibition, or restriction of single-use plastic, auxiliary containers, wrappings, polystyrene containers until July 1, 2021, or 6 months after the order issued by the governor on March 6, 2020, and any renewal of state of disaster emergency, whichever is later. So they picked up the notion of the 20-cent charge, and you can't do it. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Is there any case studies or anything where we incentivize businesses to only provide reusable bags? So instead of penalizing, instead of penalizing customers or businesses, some kind of incentive from the township to for businesses to provide only reusable bags. So I don't know what the incentive would look like, but I'm asking if there's case studies out there maybe where there's examples of local townships doing something like that.
I don't know whether it would include incentivizing. And of course, as I understand it, I don't go to Whole Foods, but they've stopped using them, I think. Haven't they?
I'm not sure about the produce department. I think they're still using bags for produce.
But otherwise,
they
they use
paper bags, not plastic.
Right, paper.
Yeah, they use paper, not plastic.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I have a comment and a question, and that is, even if we can't legally pass a ban in our municipality right now, are there other steps that the municipality can take as official steps to indicate its sentiment on this or its displeasure with plastic bags, such as passing a resolution or a statement of, endorsement of reusable bags, or like something that would be an indication of intent? I know when Pennsylvania or New Jersey was trying to pass a fracking ban, and on other issues and in other states, they've started at the municipal level. And just as you said, Penn Environment is trying to get enough municipalities to indicate support for this, that it becomes kind of a bellwether for the state government. So that's something like, is there some step, and maybe Len could advise on this, other than an ordinance? And then my second point is, when I was living in New Jersey about 10 years ago, in our municipality, we started with a anti-plastic bag initiative. And we got a mini grant for greenhouse gases, and we started a Shop the Rock. We lived in Glen Rock. We started a whole public awareness and education campaign on Shop the Rock. We gave out press releases and articles and photos in the newspaper, and little flyers at participating merchants. And we gave out free bags with a logo, Shop the Rock, and really tried to show the local merchants that we were not just against plastic bags, but we coupled that with a whole shopping local message to help show that we were trying to support local businesses. And that was well received. And it did take about 6 years until the municipality finally did pass an ordinance banning plastic bags, but they successfully did that last year. So even if we can't pass an ordinance, even if you passed an ordinance, that doesn't mean you're going to get any support from people, so that's another option, is to start with the public awareness and education.
So
well, there's nothing in the statute that prevents the supervisors from adopting a resolution that people should find other methods for carrying their stuff home from the store. They can't prevent anybody from doing that, and they can't prevent the types of educational efforts you're talking about. All they think they can prevent is local municipalities from an outright ban or tax.
So I think it's difficult in this time of COVID, when everybody is afraid of everything, if you bring your own bags back, they won't pack them for you. That doesn't hurt me because I pack my own anyway. But I think that I even find myself using a few more plastic bags than I would normally, just because of the time that we're in. So maybe the timing isn't particularly right for pushing this agenda.
I think that's a good point.
But to just kind of circle back on your first question, Cindy, is that, and Harry is correct, there's nothing, the legislature can have whatever laws it wants on the book, whether we're talking about single-use plastics or municipalities' rights to enforce gun control measures. The local municipalities still have the authority. Nothing prevents them from passing a resolution. Granted, it's not legally binding and it's unenforceable, but it just sends a message that the municipality is of a certain position, that they feel it's important to note. So, that's not something that's outside of the purview or the realm of things that we can do. I just don't know. I've never brought it up to my colleagues. What would they, whether they would be in favor or not of having a resolution for something that, we can't really legally enforce,
The funny thing,
But something it's worth talking about it, to be honest with you.
the sad thing is, I could be behind someone in the grocery store. I bring my own bag. This person in front of me doesn't, and the checker has a carousel of these plastic bags. And if that person has a large order, they can walk out of the grocery store with, no kidding, 20 of these plastic bags in their grocery cart. I mean, they use them like candy. It just, proliferation is just startling.
I mean, I personally need like a duffel bag when I go shopping for my family, so I can understand how that happens, but.
Yeah. But right now, guys, a lot of the stores are not taking return plastic bags. They're not accepting them. They're not allowing you to use reusable bags. They're requiring because of the COVID-19. So we're kind of in a situation, as Janet said, right now, it might not be the time only because of their sensitivity to all these things. So is there any way maybe we can put this as, putting forth a recommendation to the board that the EAC would like to explore what options we can have in terms of some type of plastics ban or resolution or incentive or, some type of program, put it in the language and just say it's something you'd like to table and maybe consider back in the fall once we're through, hopefully, the worst of this COVID. But right now, from what I understand, because you can't return I have 3 big containers outside of plastic bags to return, and Acme, Giant, or none of them will accept it. And to your point also, Bruce, they use the brown bags at Whole Foods, but in their plastic where your fruits is, they have a biodegradable green type of earth-friendly bag that they use for their plastic. So it's a more expensive option, but it's not available at every store.
Yeah. I have no trouble considering the resolution in the fall time frame based on the circumstances at the time. Like Leonard said, it's non-binding. It can't be enforced, but it's a suggestion to the community. This is how you should make your own contribution to the environmental protection.
Yeah, and we used to do it all the time with the school district when it came down to some of the unfunded mandates. Obviously, in those positions, we're telling the legislature that we vehemently disagree with another one of their ridiculous requirements that is being forced down the school district's throat. So again, that in itself is not legally binding, but it still just sends the message.
Sure.
So when is Small Business Day? Because I think if we could fan out with a number of volunteers when Small Business Day comes, and with bags, recyclable bags, that, as Cindy was mentioning, putting on, handing out as we're talking up Small Business Day. I bet we could get the high school students to participate. They really have an effort to try to stop single-use plastic.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Typically it's Friday or Saturday. It's like right after Thanksgiving. It's like
Saturday.
Shop local or shop small on that Saturday, and it kind of kicks off the holiday season. And it's something, you can, for example, urge people to try not to use any plastic bags during the holiday season or things like that. But maybe it's time to wrap up this issue by putting forth the, making a motion to maybe draft a resolution for the municipality to express its opposition to the state ban and its encouragement of reusable bags when appropriate and possible at the local level.
I like that idea.
That's good.
Did you volunteer, Cindy, to write this resolution?
No, I'm just making the motion. I think Harry is excellent at writing these things, and he brought the issue. I know that Harry write it.
I'll draft something for the next meeting.
Sounds
Good.
good.
Great.
Hey, Leonard, thanks for joining us. If you're still here, we appreciate it.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? I just realized I just gotta, can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay.
Can't see you. Hello?
We can hear him. I heard him.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm now, my 5:30 was canceled, so I'm driving home in the monsoon now.
Oh, great. Well, thanks for coming back. Next subject is under the new business area is the Fort Joy development. And Harry, are you interested in doing an overview of where we are with this? And
Sure,
what
I'm
the
happy
future
to.
brings?
I'm happy to. I sent around, with apologies, a little 4-page memo, which summarized what I thought were the relevant issues. And we have a couple here who are interested in this, they're neighbors of the project, and they don't have the memo, but we can talk about it. And I'm just going to start by looking at the very last piece of the memo, where I said the role of the EAC, the statute that authorizes the township to create an environmental advisory council says that it shall advise other local government agencies, including but not limited to the Planning Commission, Park and Recreation Boards, and elected officials. Well, that would include the supervisors, on matters dealing with the protection, conservation, management, promotion, and use of natural resources, including air, land, water resources located within its territorial limits. So that, I think, is a basis for the EAC to be involved a little bit in the land subdivision process, at least in those circumstances where we see a proposal which can have substantial environmental impact. And so what we're looking at here is something that started back, I think, for purposes of Newtown Township in 2016. This fellow, Claude D. Batone, and his various affiliates acquired a property that straddles the Newtown Marple line. And it is approximately, I think, 130 acres in total, of which roughly 75 is in our township and the other 55 is in Marple. And I don't know the zoning in Marple, but he's proceeded on a subdivision plan in Marple. And I believe he has a plan that would authorize 38 lots, which is not yet built. And if you go on the tax map for the county and you go into that area of Marple Township, you will see those 38 lots. They're all established as separate taxable parcels. One of the internal roadways is something called Cherry Blossom Lane in that subdivision. And where it hits the township line with Newtown, there's not a cul-de-sac, it's just a stub, which suggests that it was intended to be connected to a portion of the property in our township. So in 2016, he filed this odd little subdivision on the 75 acres in our township, which would have created 2 lots and would have extended Cherry Blossom Lane from the Marple subdivision to Gradyville Road. It was sort of, it looked a little like a little bit like playing games, because everybody knew he intended to ultimately attempt a full residential subdivision in our township to go with the one that he'd been authorized to build in, or was then seeking approvals for, in Marple. And so I think the Planning Commission said, hey, show us what you have in mind. What's your real game here? And so he filed 2 concept plans, which when I was in planning, we call them sketch plans. They now call them concept plans. They have no engineering. They just show a layout of lots. And one of them showed 43 lots. and the other of them showed 53 lots. And the township engineer really couldn't conduct any meaningful review of the concept plans. They weren't really filed plans at all, and they weren't engineered. So he just wrote a letter saying they don't comply in any respect with the existing zoning. And that was the end of the concept plan. Now, I want to back up and talk just a minute about this 75 acres. It's very, very steep slopes all over the place. There's floodplain in there. And the amount of ground which is subject to either steep slopes or floodplain together is about almost 28 acres. We have provision, the property is in a R1 zone, which says 60,000 square foot minimum. But our ordinance says, well, you've got it when you're determining what your lot area is, you have to deduct 75% of the flood hazard district, 50% of very steep slopes, that's stuff over 25%, and 25% of the steep slopes, that's stuff between 15 and 25%. So if you want to put in a R1 lot on a property that has a steep slope, you need a lot more than 60,000 square feet. The property is bisected by Hunter Run, which goes down into the Springton Reservoir. And as Cindy points out, Springton Reservoir and the Lower Crum Creek Reservoir together provide drinking water to 200,000 homes. I'm told that when the property was forested, and it was very forested, the walk down that Hunter Run ravine to the Springton Reservoir was by far the most dramatically beautiful nature walk in our township. The owner of the property basically clear-cut the property. Absolutely a felony, should have been a felony, but he didn't. So now we have this gigantic open area there. It's an eyesore, but it's also an environmental disaster. So the township didn't like this 2-lot subdivision because Cherry Blossom Road intersected Gradyville Road on a curve, and they thought the sight distances were dangerous. And for that and whatever other reasons, they turned him down. He went to the court in media. The judge in the Court of Common Pleas sent him to a retired judge as a mediator. And the township has come back with a proposed settlement agreement. The settlement agreement would provide for 50 lots, of which 47 would be, from the get-go, residential developed lots. And when you look at the attachments to the settlement agreement, you see that only 4 of the lots out of the 50 are over 60,000 square feet after applying the deduct, and less than half are over 45,000 square feet after applying the deduct. So basically, this agreement would, what's called upzoning, because it would increase the permitted density effectively, upzone the property 2 notches from R1 to R2A on exactly the property that should not be upzoned because of the environmental, in my view, because of the environmental constraints. The agreement waives all sorts of requirements, and then it says that the supervisors, if they sign it, agree to waive any other requirements that no one's yet thought of that would in any way impair his ability to get 47 building lots on this property. I have looked at some law, and I don't think, putting aside whether they should do this, I don't think they really can do this, because they are authorizing a settlement of a plan that was never filed before the township. And neither the Strathmans nor anybody else had an opportunity to participate in a subdivision proceeding relating to this plan at the township level. And they're proposing to settle, and that's why I put it in quotes when I have it in the memo, settlement agreement. They're proposing to settle claims that were never made in the appeal. The appeal doesn't challenge the zoning. The appeal doesn't challenge the lot size. The appeal doesn't challenge the deducts. And yet they're settling that on the grounds that it might be challenged in the future. Well, I don't think you can do that either in land development proceeding. Now, are they going to, if the township were into this, could they possibly get away with it? Well, the Homeowners Association in Stony Brook Boulevard has moved to intervene, and they're represented by very competent counsel. So if they are permitted to intervene, I'm feeling a lot better about it. If they're not permitted to intervene, and the township were into this agreement, I'm not sure it could be stopped. So the question for this body is, it seems to me, do we want to take a position in a letter to the supervisors that the proposed settlement agreement is simply a bridge too far and that they should not enter into it?
Can I just make a few clarifications, Mr. Chairman, before we get into that discussion, if you don't mind me interjecting, just to make sure that the issue is framed. Harry did a good job, but I just want to add some anecdotal information in there that I think is important.
Please do.
So again, Harry's framing of it for the most part is correct. Bringing this back 2016, Mr. DePaton filed what's called a conditional use application to have Cherry Blossom Lane come into Gradyville Road at the point where Gradyville Road turns. The supervisors, as Harry pointed out, felt, and I say the supervisors because I wasn't on the board at the time, felt that for safety reasons, it was not in a safe location to have that Cherry Blossom Lane come out on the Gradyville Road at that location. So they rejected the conditional use because of that reason, but also because there was no plans, the way that it's been explained to me, there were no sketch plans that were submitted to the township. So at the time that he came in for his conditional use hearing, all it showed was that it was a development for Marple. He only showed us the properties on the Marple side. And the supervisors felt like, why would we need to incur the traffic on a new town road when this is going to be a benefit for Marple Township? The clear cutting that Harry pointed out is a disgrace. I don't think anyone will disagree with that. But just to be clear, that is not on the Newtown side. That is all on the Marple side. None of that clear cutting that is currently taking place is on the Newtown side. So what he did was he took it back. He filed an appeal to the Court of Common Pleas. The judge, Judge Whalen, handed it off to not a retired judge, but a settlement judge in hopes that the parties could come to a settlement agreement. It is through those discussions that the proposed settlement agreement has been crafted and given to the township to discuss, which is exactly what happened at the last supervisors meeting. I agree, and I've said this, if you remember back from the first time I ever attended an EAC meeting, is that I think that the EAC needs to get involved more with land development and provide comments and status reports, if you will, or position papers that say the board, the EAC met, we reviewed this plan, and we need to do A, B, and C. Cindy did a great job when she went up and spoke as herself, but I think that things need to come from the EAC. So moving forward again with more things that I just want to kind of clarify here is I disagree with Harry on the legal aspect of whether the township can or cannot enter into zoning or relief as it applies to a land use appeal. There is case law out there, and Harry has sent me information and I reviewed it. There is case law out there that gives the opposite, that gives the township the authority to do what it is that the court is asking both sides to do here. The issue that a lot of people are sort of missing is that one way or the other, if the supervisors reject this settlement agreement or not, or enter into it, there is a road that's coming on to Gradyville. The Cherry Blossom Lane's coming into Gradyville Road. Whether that's going to be lined up to Stony Brook Boulevard, where the township engineer and other traffic specialists have viewed that to be the safest location and the most optimal, or if it's going to come out into what the township views the dangerous side, where it's going to be the original location up by the Gradyville Road Bridge. One way or the other, that's coming in here. And the zoning relief, as Harry pointed out, is a different beast. And, you know, because this is still pending, I'm not going to give my opinion on that. But I just wanted to clarify some things on that.
Well, I will concede several things. One thing, Leonard did catch me in that I neglected to mention that the supervisors, in exchange for this 50 lots, 47 developable, managed to get the developer to move the cut between from Cherry Blossom Lane and Gradyville Road from where he had originally proposed to a point opposite Stony Brook Boulevard. The only two issues with that are, one, everybody affected thinks it was a bad idea to do that, or substantially all. Everybody who's spoken up to it is very unhappy about it. But two, the question is whether the movement of that road cut is an appropriate trade for the waivers that this settlement agreement would give the developer.
Yeah, and look, like I said, I'm not gonna discuss the second part of that question, but the one thing I do just want to highlight is that in 2016, when this came up to the Board of Supervisors, everybody had notice. The only were they then filed their petition to intervene, so they were a party to this settlement agreement. The Springton Point Homeowners Association, by their own admission in their petition to intervene, note that they attended the meetings and that they were made aware of it, but they just never registered as a party protest. And if they did, then they would have been able to be part of those settlement discussions. But, you know, at the end of the day, when you look at a conditional use application, it's a health, safety, and welfare. I'm not disagreeing that the majority of the people who spoke up against that. That was very clear. But the one point that I'm just trying to make is that in terms of health, safety, and welfare, where the specialists tell us that that road should go for the health, safety, and welfare of the motorists and the residents, it's in a position that lines up with Stony Brook Boulevard and not at the original location, which, if this does get rejected, most likely the court will rule that it goes into that original location.
Thank you, Leonard. I have a question, and that is, maybe you're aware of this. Harry said that the Springton Point HOA had filed a petition to have intervenor status. It was my understanding that that petition has been accepted. Is that true or not?
I have not heard whether it's been granted or not. The last that I heard was that the judge, there was supposed to be I think it was a scheduling conference that was going to be taking place in mid-July. So as of today, sitting here, I have not heard whether the judge has granted that petition or not.
Okay.
I think the supervisors, Cindy, I think the supervisors did resolve not to oppose it, which is helpful. But
that is correct.
Bruce, I'm asking you to recognize the Strathmans. They have their hand up.
Yep, give me 1 second. They are unmuted, and they also made public comment as well.
Just a quick question about the road placement. The development next to us, we think of as the original Springton Point on the south side of Gradyville Road. That's one road going in, one road coming out, and it services both townships, because first part is Newtown Township, the inner part is Marple Township. Has anybody approached them about doing the same thing with this development in the reverse? So the road would come in from Marple, and service both townships and both developments, and then be a one-way going back out. So it wouldn't have to hit Gradyville Road.
So, Mrs. Strathman, I can't answer whether they have spoken to Mr. DePaton specifically about that. But in my day job, I'm a municipal zoning and land use attorney. So I represent municipalities, either a special counsel or their zoning hearing board, so on and so forth. And what you're seeing is that a majority of these, and I would actually say the vast majority or mostly all of them, that you see being built nowadays purposely moved from that model that you see with the original Springton Point where there's one way in and one way out, for the sole reason that, God forbid, a tree falls on a house, starts a fire, and there's also a tree that's blocking that entrance. You have to wait until that tree is removed for the fire truck and first responders to get into that development. So from a safety standpoint, a lot of municipalities will not allow one way in, one way out access in a lot of the newer developments.
Will they allow like an emergency exit road that's just usually blocked and not usable?
So in my experience, I've seen a combination of the two, but again, specifically, oops, excuse me, I almost got a fender bender. Specifically related to Mr. DePaton's property, I do not have the information of whether they approached him with that or not. You know, being new to the board, majority of this, or actually all of it, was done prior to me getting sworn in.
So when you refer to they approaching him, are you referring to the supervisors? Because we don't hear anything about the supervisors coming back or putting their feet down or asking questions or going back against raising any questions about the codes and the regulations and the road. Every time we have these meetings, the supervisors as a group, and I don't mean to, not picking on you, but don't convey anything to any of us that they are trying to figure something out or questioning or pushing back or anything at all. And that is, I don't understand that. And when I've asked it before, I've never gotten an answer.
Yeah, no, and look, I have no problem with you hitting me with the hard questions at all. This is a position I signed up for, so feel free to keep them coming. There's the two answers I have to that is number one, they put their foot down by denying the conditional use permit. The conditional use application for the original location of that road, they denied because they felt that it was, like I said, not in a safety position. It was not in the best location for that. And at the time, there was no subdivision plans that showed a benefit to Newtown Township. There were no homes being built on the Newtown Township side. So what they have, what the supervisors have then said is, if this road's coming in, which seems likely that it is, we want it in the safest location, which lines up to Stony Brook Boulevard. The other thing, in terms of like putting our foot down, under the laws in Pennsylvania, when you own a parcel of land, we can't unilaterally tell someone that they can't develop on that. If they were to file something with the township for either zoning relief or a subdivision plan under the MPC, which is a statute, which is a bunch of laws that govern MPCs, the municipalities planning code, which governs zoning and land use. If we don't act on that, then these get deemed approved. So we can't unilaterally say, no, Claude, you can't come in here and do A, B, and C. But what about the codes and regulations? I get the road piece, and I'm sort of understanding that that's going to happen in some way or the other. But giving away all these other things for the road, I'm not understanding why that even came, where that came from, or why that could even possibly happen. Yeah. So again, I was not privy to those conversations prior to when this was drafted. So I don't want to speculate as to why it kind of panned out the way that it panned out. I will say, just to, in that agreement, it does not allow, it's not an approval for any land development or subdivision. All it is the zoning relief. By right, he's allowed 37 or 34 lots under the proposed settlement agreement. It comes down to 47 buildable lots. A lot of, I will say, the steep slope disturbance, I believe is attributed to the location of the road in addition to the individual lots. I'm not denying the fact that there is, under that proposal, steep slope disturbance for the individual lots, but this is, again, where we are with it.
Leonard, I'm sorry, but did Leonard say that this agreement is not the product of arm's length negotiation, but was simply a proposal by the developer for the township to consider?
No, I did not say that at all, Harry. What I said was that the township was in negotiations as directed by the court to come up with a settlement agreement. That is exactly what I said.
If I could chime in, I would just like to say that when I was at the meeting at which I spoke and the Strathmans were there, I would just concur with their characterization of everything that the Board of Supervisors and their attorneys said, was that throughout that discussion or explanation of the process and how we got to where we are, there was the board repeatedly positioned it that this was a decision by the judge that had been handed to the township, that the township had no say in. And to me, that is honestly disingenuous, because it makes it sound like the township was not even present in those negotiation meetings. And if I'm understanding it correctly, Leonard, the judge was there. The developer had his representation, making his arguments, and the township had their representatives making their recommendations. And I would assume that there would have been some sort of dialogue, some sort of back and forth. And yet the board repeatedly characterized it as being handed to them, that they had no say. And then the second point is that it seems like a really, really bad deal where the township agreed or insisted on the location of a road, and that because they were so transparent about that this was their position, that Claude, took them to the cleaners and said, well, if you want that road there, you're going to have to grant me relief on 15 critical ordinances. And for the EAC members who were not there, if I could briefly summarize some of the amazing relief that has been granted or would be granted, is that for steep slopes, 9 of the properties proposed would disturb 100% of steep slopes. And 35% of 50 properties would disturb more steep slopes than is permitted by the ordinance. Of the very steep slopes, 6 lots disturb 90% or more of very steep slopes. And just to understand this, the ordinance, which has been developed according to best code practices, best standards for municipalities to protect homeowners, to protect the community, the ordinance says that 5% of the very steep slopes is the limit, that no more than 5% of very steep slopes should be disturbed. And yet 6% of the properties disturb 90% of the very steep slopes, when the ordinance says it should only be 5%. So to me, that's just unbelievable. How could the Board of Supervisors agree to this? If the conditional use decision is supposed to be for the health, safety, and welfare of the community, they're choosing the location of that road and saying that is paramount. The possibility that there might be one traffic accident at some point in time, we can't live with the possibility of a traffic accident, but we can live with the certain knowledge that the steep slopes, the very steep slopes, will be grossly defaced. The watershed will be compromised. The drinking water for 200,000 people. We're willing to compromise that. We're willing to give up on the riparian buffers to grant relief to that. They just, to me, it's a very poor deal. And I don't know why Claude has to get 50 lots out of that land. And Leonard, I understand the concept of taking and that a property owner has the right to develop his land so he gets some value from it. But couldn't he have a lot fewer lots that were designed according to low impact development principles or smart development? He could still have a lesser number of lots and properties that were designed to reflect the sensitive nature of this land and still get some value out of that. I'm just stunned.
Well, as I understood it, the Stony Brook residents were getting their legal team and they were going to have their shot to be heard. So I believe the supervisors already allowed that to go through. So is there anything that we then, in support of the supervisors, can provide, you know, maybe a letter as Cindy gave, you know, testimony as an individual? Is there anything that the EAC can do to help support this and let the supervisors know about this and make, you know, the letter on those points that she brought up? Because it's unfair. Leonard's on the call and we're giving him the grief, and he wasn't necessarily involved in it. Is there anything that we as the EAC can make our points known as an EAC member?
I'll comment on that. Our charter is to make recommendations. I think there's an opportunity here for us to make a recommendation.
Bruce, I'm sorry. Leonard just called. He got disconnected. He's going to call right back in 2 minutes because he wanted to address that. But
okay. Well,
yeah,
I'll keep
that's
talking.
gonna be a problem.
As soon as Cindy started speaking, he did not hear a word you said, Cindy. So
well, he heard it all. It's pretty much what I said at the Board of Supervisors meeting. I basically said it for
what she said
Joe because I thought perhaps they were not at that meeting, and the Scobles either.
Okay, he said.
We lost you, Sheila.
Leonard said that he is trying to get back in. He will get back in and be on the call. I did mention, Cindy, that he said he lost you and he wanted to listen to everything. So I want to make sure that he can give his comments, but also in the meantime, I'm wondering what we can do, you know, to support the supervisors, because from what I understood from the meeting, that this was being turned around to the legal team. They were going to get a chance for Stony Brook residents to be heard by the lawyers before they accepted anything. Is that the case, Harry?
I'm afraid I didn't quite get your question, Sheila.
The question is, right now it's being sitting with the Stony Brook lawyers, parent of the association is going through and they're trying to have a chance to be heard. Is that correct?
They are trying to intervene in the law case so that they might speak against the settlement agreement and perhaps convince the judge that they don't have the power to enter into it. Their intervention would not be necessary, frankly, if the township refuses to sign it. I mean, I want them to intervene so that if the township does sign it, because we don't know where the chicken is and where the egg is. But if we can stop this thing over on Bishop Hollow Road, we would be much better off, I think. And frankly, what happens at that point is, you know, they litigate the Cherry Blossom intersection, and DeBatone wins or he doesn't. And if he wins, he gets a road at a curve and he gets 2 lots. End of story. And that's all he gets. Now we have to know that he will come in for 70 lots, and there will be a great big long hustle, and we'll turn him down, and then he'll go back to the court and there'll be another long hustle. And by then it will be 2024. I don't see any reason to give him 47 lots today.
Right. Bruce, have you been able to get Leonard back in? If you go back into your chat room down below participants and add him, because Rich is no longer on the call.
No, Sheila, I'm here. I'm monitoring it. He hasn't called in yet.
Okay. All right.
Let me just say this. The answer to your question, Sheila, is yes. We really should submit a formal comment to the supervisors.
Absolutely.
What I think we need to do before submitting that comment is get consensus from the group here as to whether we want to do that. And before this meeting is over, I'd like to take a quick vote to see what collectively our opinion is.
Let's just make sure that we've heard all they're the people on the line who are the most directly affected by this. Fred and you guys.
I also want to apologize. I'm sorry, Cindy, that happened as soon as I started, as soon as you started to talk. I got the emergency flash flood notification on my phone, and then it didn't want to reconnect again. So I apologize. But from what Sheila said, it's just a summary of what you presented at the supervisors meeting. Is that correct?
Yes.
If there's any other questions, I apologize. Or someone can just contact me later. I don't want to hold up your meeting. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Back to reaching consensus on this.
Is anybody able to like share their screen so they can? I'm not a lawyer, so I'm a little lost on the whole visual of all this. I like pictures, I guess.
I'm sorry, what's your question, Jason?
Just I don't have a visual of all this discussion that's taking place. I don't have a real good visual in my head of where we're talking about or what we're talking about.
What I would suggest for Joe and Jason, who might not be as up to speed on this, I would suggest you go back on the township website, which is excellent, and go to the calendar or maybe agendas. You go to the agenda for the Board of Supervisors meeting for, what was that date? June 16th?
Hold on, time out. Before you do that, let me just see if I can show you something, Jason, on the screen here. And I don't know whether I'm going to pull this off or not, but let me just try something here for a second. This is what they are proposing. You can see that.
Well, that's helpful, Harry, but I think it's important for them to know that if you go to the township website and you go to the agenda for the Board of Supervisors June 16th meeting, the agenda itself is full of hyperlinks to all of the documentation that the developer submitted as exhibits to support what he wanted, including among them is this map that Harry's showing us, and also our links to every single comment letter that were submitted by dozens of residents who commented on this. So I think that's an excellent place to start, is the online agenda with all the attachments.
I would also argue that the attachments, the maps, you can't read what lot numbers they are. They're very, even if you enlarge them. I mean, I've said something to the township about that and I've never heard back anything about getting clearer maps.
Well, they're always hard to read.
Yeah.
And this one is kind of sideways.
I would also say that the HOA for Springton Estates seems to be their main concern. What I gather is the placement of the road. I wouldn't want the codes and regulations, which actually is our main concern, to be lost or end up being sort of second to that, because I think their main concern is the placement of the road.
To some extent, I did have a long conversation with Ray Lopez, who he and his wife are the ones who are filing the intervenor petition. And while I had the same concern as you and the same perception, and while the location of the road is their primary concern, they are also concerned secondarily about density, which, if you think of density broadly, because I was concerned that the environmental impact would get lost in it, and I was hoping that their intervenor petition would be that they would surface those issues. And the secondary point for them is the density, and then within that are things like the steep slope disturbance, the riparian buffer, So that is encompassed. And Sheila, to get back to your question of what can we do or should we do, I totally agree with Bruce that Leonard has said tonight, and he said last fall when he first attended the first EAC meeting, is he said the Board of Supervisors is looking to the EAC. They want us to comment. This is our role. It's our obligation to be commenting on things like this. And I think it would be a gross neglect of our duty to not comment.
So, Cindy, may I ask if you submitted your comments in writing to the Board of Supervisors?
I did not.
See
No.
it? They should see all of that.
But I think what Leonard said is Cindy did speak, but she spoke as an individual, and that her words are very important. But I think having the words of the EAC provides additional merit that I think we need to consider. And I think that Cindy is spearheaded this issue, and I think it's important to all the residents that, you know, it shouldn't be an issue whether Stony Brook residents or the other Graterville. It's about what's best for the environment, what's best for Newtown, and you know, making sure that everyone has their day in court. So I do believe that EAC should have a comment letter, and it could be crafted by whichever way you all agree upon. But I do believe that would be important as our role.
Absolutely, I agree too.
And Janet, just the only reason I did not submit it is an EAC letter is I actually just drafted that all the afternoon of the meeting. And
so good, Cindy, you're so good.
Did not have time to circulate it to the entire EAC. And I would never, you know, it needed to be reviewed by the entire EAC and have their support. It would not have been appropriate for me to represent that as the EAC's.
I understand that, but now it is appropriate to put it in writing if the EAC wants to support that. So supervisors have to read it.
Well, that was a great introduction, Janet. Maybe it's time for me to make a motion for people voting as to whether we should submit a comment or not, and what that comment should be. I think it's pretty clear what the comment is, but the idea of submitting something to the supervisors, we wanted to have a collective agreement that makes the most sense. So.
The motion.
Okay. Do you have a second?
Yes.
I do. Second.
Okay. Harry, do we take a vote now, or are we set to go?
Or do we have discussion first?
We need a vote. The draft letter says it was unanimous. I don't know that it's unanimous.
Mm-hmm.
Take a vote.
Okay.
All right.
Sheila, how do you feel?
I feel that the EAC needs to give a comment letter, and I feel that they need to make sure that our rules and regulations are respected. And I don't believe that we should be entering an agreement that is in violation of everything that we're trying to support, which is the environment. So
that's a yes. Janet,
yes.
How do you feel?
Our voice has to be heard, and that's what we're here for.
Exactly. Cindy?
Yes, I think we need to express, provide input to the Board of Supervisors for their consideration as they make this decision.
All right. Jason?
Yes, I think we should definitely provide our input.
And Joe, you're still there?
I'm here.
Okay, and what's your vote?
Yes.
Okay, so and I'm voting yes as well.
How about Harry?
Harry, what are you voting? Okay, so it sounds like we've got a unanimous agreement to submit a formal comment letter to the supervisors indicating our position on the development. Is that everybody agrees with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So you're going to circulate a draft, Bruce?
Pardon me?
You're going to circulate a draft?
Yes, I will. At the conclusion of this meeting or first thing tomorrow morning.
Good.
And barring any significant disagreement, we'll submit that to the supervisors by the end of this week.
Excellent.
Yeah, just for a little background for Jason and Joe, because they're relatively new to the EAC. there is a rhythm to this process. And Leonard, you can jump in if I'm getting this wrong, but the Board of Supervisors, as you probably know, meets generally twice a month on Monday evening. And on like Thursday, prior to each meeting, Suzanne Walnanen, who's the township secretary, puts together an informational packet, an agenda and a packet of reading material, and provides it to the board members for them to review prior to the meeting on Monday night. So anytime we have something that we want to submit to them, whether it's a resolution or an ordinance or a comment letter like this, we have to work with that timing and get it to, usually, what is it, Bruce? Get it to Suzanne by like noon on Thursday or something?
That's what she targets for, yes.
Yeah. So it's just important to think about that timing, for that, the mechanics of it. And then Leonard, could you help us understand the process of like what the next steps are in terms of the judge accepting or making a decision on the intervener petition? And then are there constraints on the Board of Supervisors by when they, by law, have to make a decision on things?
Yep. So first, let me say that I did text the solicitor as I was driving. Here now I'm somewhat presentable, so I'll go back to a camera. I texted the solicitor as I was driving and to confirm whether or not there was, whether the petition to intervene was granted or not. From their, sorry, I'm moving all over the place right now. Sorry, Cindy. Okay. So when you file a petition to intervene, there is then a response date, meaning that the parties who are part of the original application or lawsuit have, I think it's 21 days to respond to that petition to intervene, whether or not they are going to contest it or not. As we made clear at the supervisors meeting, the township is not going to contest the petition to intervene for the Springton Point Homeowners Association. We believe that even though that they could have filed as a party protestant when this first came up in 2017 or 2016, we're not going to deny them their day in court if they want to have that. That's different than what Mr. DePaton's attorneys most likely will be doing. They will most likely be filing to essentially try to get their petition to intervene kicked out. If the petition to intervene is granted, then as Harry said, all four parties come together and they try to work something out. The four parties being Mr. DePaton, the township, the owners, and the Springton Point Homeowners Association, in addition to the settlement judge. If that happens, it is no longer in the realm of MPC approvals or deadlines or anything like that. We're and even right now we are outside of the realm of MPC approvals. We're purely on the court's time right now. So it's whenever the judge decides that each party has had enough to try to come to a solution, or if one party decides to pull out of the settlement, then that's where it is. Did I answer all those questions that you had?
Yeah, that's Cindy? Really helpful. Now, two other questions. Again, I didn't realize this, and Jason and Joe might not, but the fourth party you mentioned is the Roners, and they are residents.
The Roners? Yep.
Yeah, if you explain who they are and how they got into why they were at the negotiating table through all this settlement process.
So in 2016 or 2017, when the conditional use application was submitted to the township, like anyone at a zoning hearing board, a conditional use is a type of zoning relief that's only granted through the governing body. Special exceptions and variances are done by the zoning hearing board. Conditional use is explicitly laid out in the zoning ordinance that it has to be decided by the governing body. They vary from municipality of what the governing body has to approve for conditional use. At the time that conditional use application was submitted, anyone could have registered as a party protestant, which means that on appeal, they would have legal standing to be a party in that matter. So they've registered as a party protestant. When Mr. Baton was rejected by the township and he filed his appeal, the owners then filed a petition to intervene. Their property is located directly in front of where the original Cherry Blossom Lane Road would be coming out of. So if you know that location of the property, it lines up directly to their driveway. And if you look at the map that Harry was trying to show us on the share screen, you can see it line up perfectly where the original Cherry Blossom Lane was to be. So as such, they were a party to this litigation. They were a party to this appeal, and that's why, you know, there's when you look at the signatory lines, there's three. There's one for Mr. DePaton, one for the township, and one for the owners.
So a couple points, Leonard, and it's so helpful to have you at this meeting. So we really, really appreciate it.
Please accept my apology for my sweatshirt. I was drenched when I got it. I was drenched when I got in my car.
Your appearance is the least of our concerns. So if I were to speculate, and nobody has to comment on this, if I were the owners, I would guess that the owners would be very happy if the road changed locations. So if we think about—
You mean unhappy?
Well, the owners want the road to be moved from where it was originally planned. So they're probably very happy with the new proposed location.
Correct. I was looking at it from the other angle, meaning road change from the proposed settlement right now.
So just hold that thought. Now, another question is, could the EAC have filed as a party protestant 2 years ago?
No, one of the criteria when one registers as a party protestant, the number one thing is usually proximity to the actual location. So anyone who lives adjacent to the property, across from the property, it's usually about 250 feet from the property in question, or 250 feet, or somewhere from 250 to 500. Usually it's a proximity question. So that's for a party protestant. When you file your petition to intervene, the hurdle is a little bit higher, but one of them is still proximity to the affected area or the subject property.
Okay. Last question is, I know that we feel that it's appropriate for the EAC to comment on this. Is there any scenario under which it might be relevant for the Planning Commission or Zoning Hearing Board to provide comment letters from perhaps the perspective that the Planning Commission is the body that's responsible for upholding the ordinances of the township code? And that if they were to see an instance where they feel those codes are not being upheld or being violated or diluted or something like that, like mishandled, could you see a scenario under which it would be appropriate for them to also render comment?
I mean, it's a hard question to answer because I think you can always come up with a scenario wherein a different organization decides to provide public comment, or excuse me, a position paper on something pending before the township. I would say it would be completely out of the realm for the zoning hearing board to do, since it's not pending before them, and the zoning hearing board sitting as a quasi judicial independent body of the township. In terms of the Planning Commission, again, I think it might also fall under the fact that since it's not before them, whether they would feel it's necessary, I don't know. I'm just speculating. But I think that, quite frankly, the EAC is the number one person to be pointing to in this situation, because, as you know, no matter whether it's coming through a court-ordered settlement or it's coming through the zoning hearing board, the EAC is still touching every single thing that happens in the township, where some of the other bodies might not necessarily be doing so. And the Planning Commission will still have their say if this was to be approved. The Planning Commission would still have their say, because in that proposed settlement agreement, there's nothing in there that waives subdivision, land development. The only thing that it's coming to an agreement on is the zoning relief in there. And the one thing I forgot to mention when Harry originally gave his overview, that comment that he pointed out, where it makes it sound as if the supervisors and or the developer, if we can't think of something in this agreement, then he has the automatic right to do A, B, and C. I think that was the same question that you brought up, Cindy, in the public comment, wherein Rich Sikora did an explanation of why that's not, it's not interpreting it in that manner of saying, yes, any zoning relief you get, it's essentially to make sure that the proposed court order is moving forward.
I do have a question. Has anyone from the EAC approached the owners to make them aware of issues? Because obviously, if they're just looking at their own perspective, maybe we could, in the process of their negotiating, they're at the table. So has anyone ever reached out to them and maybe brought them to light some of the issues regarding the environment? And all it would do is would allow the township and the owners to work together to make sure that, our EAC's perspective were heard. Does anyone have any contact with them, or?
I guess not.
Yeah, I mean, that's really something that we have an avenue to explore, because maybe making them aware of some of the trade-offs, we at least providing some leveraging or some negotiating power to make them aware of what your concerns are, from an environmental standpoint. Because if they want to get this road moved, which we understand is our position, we want to see at what cost it's coming. And so maybe it just makes them aware. So if possible, I think it might be helpful if we even maybe carbon copy them on the position, if possible. I mean, is it something, Cindy, you would consider?
I think if we're going to, I'm not in favor of carbon copying, but I'm in favor of, it'll be an attachment to the supervisors meeting, which will have a link, which will allow them to just go into there. I think there's no reason why we can't point them to that link to understand what our position is.
Right, but I want them to understand, if they just want to win getting this road moved, I'd like them to understand what they're giving up, and I'd like them to be aware of it. That's all.
I think isn't against that. I think he's just proposing a different method.
Okay.
I have one last question for Leonard, and that is, there's two positions that I've heard out there. One is that the Board of Supervisors said repeatedly that they think they have to take this settlement, because if they don't take the settlement, if they reject it, it goes back to the settlement judge, and the settlement judge can kind of render whatever decision he wants, accept what's there, reject it, or I guess craft something new. That's one scenario. Then one of these speakers at the Board of Supervisors meeting toward the very end, I forget who it was, said, well, wait a minute. Isn't there a possible scenario where the township rejects it, the judge rejects it, and then Claude is left with nothing, and he has to come back and go through the proper channels of present a plan, go before the planning board, and then fight his way for all this relief. Do you remember that alternative?
Yeah, I don't remember it in detail, but I sort of remember, I think, something towards the end of that. So I'm sorry, are you asking me whether that's a viable option?
Yes, I'm trying to explore, what are the different possible scenarios that might unfold?
Yeah, so the first question that you had is, if the township was to reject the proposed settlement agreement, what happens is, yes, no zoning relief would be granted to Mr. Guipitan, but the road would be coming in, and where the road most likely would be coming in is going to be in that original location.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, not necessarily. He'd have to win his law case.
He would have to, so again, the reason why we moved, Harry, let me finish. I let you finish, and I'll finish now. So the reason why we're in the settlement is because it doesn't seem like the township is on too good of legal footing to deny the conditional use application for the placement of the road. So If we were to reject the settlement, the judge most likely would rule that the road is coming through, and where it would be placed would be in the original location. That's the exact litigation that we're fighting out right now in the court system, is the denial of the conditional use hearing, the conditional use permit, excuse me. So the supervisors reject the proposed settlement. Yes, he gets no zoning. That's great. But the outcome of that is that the road gets put into the place where every traffic engineer will tell you it's in the least safe location for Gradyville Road. The second question that you were sort of asking, Cindy, is if everybody says no, then what happens? Yes, he would still have to go through the normal zoning hearing board process and planning commission process, just like he's supposed to do under the proposed settlement agreement. He would still have to go through the planning, but the zoning relief wouldn't be there. Did I answer them in the order?
Yes, you did. And I think one of the other points that person made was that if everything gets rejected, he doesn't get a zoning relief, the road goes back to the original position, then he's got to go through the regular channels to fight for getting these lots developed. And the other point the person made was that they were thinking that if that happened, even though the road would be in the least safe place, they were hypothesizing that Claude would be unlikely to get very many lots approved, so that the development, the number of houses that he would be successful in getting would be a lot smaller than 50. And that even if you were to have the road in an unsafe place, that there'd be fewer people coming and going out of that road.
Yeah, by right, he's allowed, by right today, he can build 34 of those properties. By
How
right.
many? How many?
34.
I never saw that.
Why is
right.
that, Leonard?
Is there a plan that shows that?
By right, under the zoning ordinances, the current zoning ordinances as it is today, he's permitted to have 34 of them. The zoning relief, as you see, allows him to have, it will show 50 lots on the entire subdivision. 47 of them are technically buildable from day one. 3 of them, he would have to, under the proposed settlement agreement, coming into the zoning hearing board for the full zoning relief.
Is
So
there,
let's go
Leonard,
back
is there a by right plan that we can look at?
I don't
believe
know.
34 lots.
You don't believe 34 lots, and you can confirm that with the solicitor, but that's what we said in the township meetings, and that's, I believe it's in some of the court filings that originally, he's permitted to have 34 by right.
But
There's nothing in the court record that says that, and there's nothing in his petition that says that.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me, but again,
I
34 is enough. Yeah,
if that's the case, Leonard, that he's already has approved 34 lots by right, how was that decided? Like, what process would that have gone through?
So it's with any sort of major development that a township is subject to, without it going through the formal processes, you look down at what it is that the zoning code permits. You look at what it is the developer is trying to do. And you can say, look, underneath the current laws right now, it's 34. He's allowed to do 34. 9 times out of 10, developers always trying to get more, right? So that's when they have to come in for the various forms of zoning relief and everything. But that's there's no, I don't know whether there's a by right plan that was ever submitted to the township, but 34 is the number by right. Again, that's be a very random number for me to pick up, but it's 34 by lot size and everything else that he's permitted to have today.
Yeah, I think I have heard that now that you say that. But now when he would have done that and the township would have granted that approval, what consideration would there have been for ordinances about steep slopes, very steep slopes, things like that?
Yeah, he still would have probably, and this is just me surmising from this, but I would suspect because of how hilly that area is, he would still need zoning relief from some of the steep slope and very steep slope ordinances. But as you and I know, the zoning hearing board and others have granted projects in the past wherein the steep slope disturbance is a little bit more severe than what we're seeing underneath the original 34 by right.
So if we somehow got back to that scenario where you had the 34 by right lots, each of those lots would still have to go before the zoning hearing board for relief from those ordinances?
I'm just surmising that some of them, based off of the terrain, would have to have some sort of zoning relief potentially, because of the amount of steep slope there is back there. I don't know that I don't know that concrete, and I don't want to commit to that.
Okay, well, I guess I should ask the converse, that in this scenario, he would still, if there were steep slopes, he would have to go and seek that relief, that it hasn't already been granted by FIA.
No, there's nothing granted. There's nothing granted in this project whatsoever.
Okay. Okay. Thanks for, I know I'm all this.
I have a question. Leonard, you folks are the supervisors are meeting, I believe, next Monday, the 13th, and then you're off for the rest of July, and you come back on August 10th. When will the supervisors make a decision on this matter?
So the petition to intervene deadline is tomorrow. Whether the court has made a decision, whether the court makes a decision prior to Monday night's hearing, I would suspect that if they make a decision on the petition to intervene prior to Monday night, there's a potential it could be on the agenda. But if not, you're looking at probably the August deadline, or excuse me, the August supervisors meeting.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Did we drop Harry, or he's no longer on the call, or what happened to him?
He seems to be gone.
Yeah, I'm not seeing them either.
I think we lost Jason also.
And we're going to lose.
I'm here.
Yeah, I
I'm
think
here.
we need to wrap up.
I'm
Sorry.
here.
Yeah.
Jason's here. Yeah.
Well,
If I can
Just
just say
invisible.
to the Strathmans, because I haven't had much conversation with you, I'll give you my cell phone number if you guys want to give me a call if you have any other questions. It's 610.
Oh, okay, hang on a second. 610.
220.
Recorded right now, so if you want everyone to have your.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Leonard, this is on YouTube.
Never mind.
Yeah,
Never mind.
Not
Never
on
mind.
YouTube.
You're
All right.
welcome.
Just email me. The township has the email address on there.
You're
On
welcome.
the township website, you'll see. Oh, that would have been bad.
Leonard,
township-
you owe me lunch.
On the township website under officials, it has my township email address. You can shoot me an email, and I'll contact you guys through that.
I really appreciate it, because not being part of homeowners associations, but being sort of the biggest, I think we're the people who are going to be affected by this, maybe one of the most, and also being a family who's been here since, almost over 100 years on this land. We just feel sort of like we're out on our own. So
Yeah.
I appreciate this committee giving us a chance to be part of it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, great. Rich, are you still here?
Yes, I am.
Okay. You have a 7 o'clock meeting to go to?
I do.
Okay. Well, I think that's an excuse for us to bring this meeting to conclusion.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any comments before we close this meeting?
I hope I didn't talk too much, everyone. I'm sorry.
No, we appreciate your input.
We do.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to propose that we adjourn this meeting then.
Okay, I agree.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
See everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Thanks.